Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Monday. It is May the 14th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And just heads up, the last two Mondays I've had some internet issues. They said they're doing some upgrades and stuff around here, so I was a little late again this morning, and I'm hoping that we don't have any more problems. They said I could have more problems. I don't know why. It just happens to be Monday each week, the last 2 weeks, but they said I could have some more issues temporary. So if I'm next few mornings or so, if it's if the mid-morning chart is not there on time, it may be that I don't have internet again. So it's been kind of frustrating, but they said it shouldn't last too much longer, and I may or may not have any more issues at all. So, but they told me that last time they didn't think I'd have any more issues, and of course this morning when I got here I didn't have any internet. So anyway, just a heads up in case you're looking for the chart lesson and wondering why it's late at the last. If I have any more issues, you wonder why it's late. That's probably why. So, but anyway, let's talk about the chart. Today was really just a range day, and there's two tiers to this thing. You started off up here with a midline, but once we went lower, once we broke through here, I would look for a possible measured move. And if you measure that upper tier, and you see we bounced off that to the tick. We end up going a little bit lower, but of course we're a little bit higher up here at the top too, so that doesn't surprise me. But the fact that we bounced here to the tick twice, that's a good indication. So that it's probably, that would have been my target if once we started lower. And I would also, just in case, I would measure this leg, and I would probably look for, I'd measure it from here and from here. But either way, it doesn't really work out. It turns out that we get a perfect measured move down on that this range up here, and you can tell that's a range. Prices are going back and forth across the EMA, kind of flat. We're working off the highs, working off the lows. We only bounced down here once, and we didn't get a full bounce. So once we started going lower, that's why you have to assume if it's going to be a range day, maybe this is a midline. So keep that in mind. And there was kind of a midline within both of these two sides of the bigger range. So in the end, this is just a midline right here between, here's your high and here's your low. And then there's a midline between each of them. And you can see we played off both sides of that one, and we played off both sides of this one. So when it's a range day like this, what you want to try to do is sell the highs and buy the lows, and vice versa. So sell the highs, buy the lows, and then once it gets down here, you could look at buying these lows again too. We really didn't get any good setups down here, unfortunately. So you don't see any buys down there. I mean, there wasn't much down here. Most of this, really played on through after the 2 o'clock hour. So this one might have been tempting to you, but as long as we're still making lower lows here and lower highs, I wouldn't be looking at buying. And by the time we made a higher low, it's right in here, and you're going long right into the midline of this side, and that's a really big bar. So I didn't mark it. You might have maybe considered that one, but I just think that late in the day, I'm not going to take that trade, but you might consider that one. All right, well, let's back out a little bit. We'll talk about the trades. It won't take long today, and we'll wrap it up. 7 o'clock hour came right in here, right through this bottoming out here. And I believe this bar was into the 7 o'clock hour. But I don't know if I'd want to try to pick a bottom right there. Yeah, that's 8 o'clock. That's a possibility. We're not real far away from the EMA. Generally, you want to wait on a higher low. But that's a possibility. You might take that trade. I'm probably not going to take that one. I'm probably not going to take this next one either. I'm probably going to wait on the true reversal pattern. But a lot of times, you're going to miss a lot of the movement waiting. But you might consider both of these. This was just a new low. We do have a break here, and a move to a new low, and that's a nice reversal bar. And we're a little bit away from the EMA, but it's not enough to make me want to take it really. You get a higher low here, and you can see we bounce off those previous closes, and that's about a 50% move from the overnight stuff. So that's about where you would expect a possible bounce. So I like this one better than this one, but the one I like best is to wait on the true reversal. And it heads back to the top. We actually got a close outside here and 2 legs up. So even that one's tempting to go short. But again, we're not quite back to where the overnight highs are, so we may push up again, and we end up doing that. But even if you'd have taken that, it would have worked. But then we make notice what happens. We're coming down. We get a close outside. We try to go lower. We move up, and you push right back above. You come back and you test that EMA. You get a failed second entry short. We're probably trying to make a retest here, and that ends up going and making a new high. And so we were probably trying to test these previous highs is what we were trying to do there. And if you had a setup here, you might have gotten sucked into the short side. Of course, I don't have one. There's no setup here for a short on my chart, but it doesn't mean there might not have been one on yours. But the fact that we pushed right back through the EMA, I'd be real leery about getting short right in there. You got to be careful. At this point, this is a range, or it's looking like one, and the overnight highs here and the overnight lows here, so there's not a lot of room. And where you got to be careful is in the middle. That's probably where you have more failures than anything, so be careful in there, trying to get long or short. The best ones are usually off the highs or the lows of the range. And we didn't get a lot of setups like that. Most of them were, we did get a few here off the short side, but we ended up having this channel working down, which if you draw that off there, once I saw this, I would have started looking to see if there's a possible trend line, and of course there is. And you get a close outside. It's not real convincing here, but we get an overshoot down here anyway on that measured move, and so you might be expecting a reversal down here. But anyway, this is basically a lower high, and so it is right into the EMA, but this is looking like a range, and so the odds are we're probably going to the other side, and this is where you got to try to get short, is at the highs. So that's basically, I would have liked it better if it ticked higher and then turned down, but it couldn't get higher there and goes on down. So I'd let it break lower, and I might drop a limit order a tick back or so, or if you were any more than a tick back into that bar, you would have missed this trade. And then of course it pulls back again, and you get notice that new low, first entry short, second entry short, and it turns down right off that previous high right there, second entry short, a bearish bar. That turns out to be a pretty good move. There's a little small bar here that's relatively bearish. It's only 3 ticks, so it's the first close outside that short term one. So we're probably headed lower to the other side. So that's one to consider, but again, right here in the middle is where you got to be really careful unless it's coming back like this double test right here, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I'm not crazy about that one. You could argue for it, but just because it's a small bar, it'd be fairly low risk, but I think you're better off to skip it. Then of course we bounce down here where the overnight lows are. You get a higher low right here. And that's another one you possibly might consider. It actually goes out both sides of the bar, but I think you're better off to wait and see if you get something a little better, because you got to be aware of this trend line right here. So I think you're better off to wait and see if you get another short opportunity, which you do. Of course, if you'd have taken that, it would have worked. You could have looked at that as a higher low off this bounce off the lows. So I'll mark it. The key here would be wherever you got to go long here, you got to make sure you got room to get out before this trend line, but I'd want room before this EMA as well, because you might hit that and turn back down. So you got to be careful there. The better play is to wait and see if you get another short here, and that comes right there. And you actually pull back here, and it turns down off that trend line again. So really you could say there's a higher low right there, but again, it's in the middle. So I'm probably going to want a trap of some kind. And even then, you got to be really careful because traps will fail a lot in the middle. But when it comes back and it tests that trend line again, and that's a failed second entry long and it's testing the midline and testing this trend line twice, and it actually moved up and turns and goes out the other side. I like that one. Just to try to ride it down to the low. You should be able to get a scalp out of that. But you got to be real careful because somebody asked me about a failed second entry long. I think they actually had a failed second entry short right in here. Their chart looked a little different than mine, but I believe it was right in here. They thought this was a failed second entry short, and they went long right here, and it turns and goes down on them, and they got burned. Well, the bigger trend is down at this point because you got this darker blue channel, and you can see that trend line in play all the way down. So make sure you draw these trend lines. And so it does come back here again, and it turns down right off that trend line, but look at all those matching lows. There's not much room right there. I think you'd be better off to take this one versus this one. But still, really, without a possible trap, I don't like going short right there off that middle. I just really don't. But you could probably argue for that. I'll go ahead and make it green. But that'll fail on you sometimes, and you'll be saying, why did that fail? Well, it's just not. You get more failures in the middle, but you can see that trend line in play. And so that gives that, and plus that you've got the EMA, the midline of the range, and the trend line all working together right there. So that one's got a little more credence, so you might take that one. But you see it tried to come back. And I think maybe that's where he saw the failed second entry. He thought that was a failed second entry short and tried to go long, but he's going long right into all that resistance right there. So just not a good place. And then this is basically a double top here. And so you get a first entry long, and then you move down and you get a second entry long. And this is, you might even look at this as a higher low, but you got to remember you got this bigger trend line. We don't have a new low in place. Plus you got this short-term trend line, and it's still holding. So when this breaks higher and turns, when it broke lower right there, we're probably coming down to the lower side of this channel. In fact, we went much further. So I like that for a possibility. It's not off the key entry point. It is into the overnight. It's not quite into the overnight low, but it's close enough. That's where I had my line marked, where you get the most touches and closes. So that's always suspect. So I'd probably skip that one, but there's some reasons to like that one because it's basically a breakout pullback short. Even though we didn't go lower, it's close enough, and there's probably a little bit of a trap there too because there's probably a lot of people that are trying to catch this bounce off the low, and they don't see all these trend lines and all this resistance straight ahead, straight above, and they get burned there. And you can see we come back here and it holds again, but that bar is too bullish. This one's fairly bearish, but by the time then it's got a matching low, so I'm not going to go short right there. Not when you've been away from the MA that long. It does bounce back, and you do get your measured leg here, but this thing it actually went lower and turns and went out the other side, but that bar is just huge. You can see that bar that's a 13 tick bar. So I'm not going to probably risk that one trying to pick a bottom. It's just not worth it. And you do get a second entry short here, but you had an overshoot and you're not back to the trend line here yet. You can't really find a good trend line in here either. It looks like it could be a spike in a channel. And if you play it like that, you're looking at this little channel, and so that would be the first break of it. So I just don't see anything that would make me want to take that short right there, even though it is a second entry short. And you get another little breakout. This is kind of a repeat pattern to this right here. It's almost a perfect repeat pattern. So same kind of bar. You break higher, people trying to catch you low, and it turns back down. And it's just a lower eye, and it's right into the low of the day. And this is been strong support. So I don't like that one either. And then you actually get a higher low right here, but it's right back into that trend line. We hadn't really had a convincing close outside. We've had a couple of overshoots, but you don't know that it doesn't turn up and touch and go, and maybe this is a midline and we're going to get another measured move down. So I think you want to wait for the reversal pattern, which comes here. It's after 2 o'clock, and it didn't go very far, but it would have worked. So being that close to 2 o'clock, you could probably argue for that one. I'll mark it, but it is after 2 o'clock. But it is that reversal pattern, and that's what you'd really want to see right there. And even though it doesn't go very far, it gets enough for a scalp. So that's really what we're expecting here. So, but yeah, not a bad day. Not a great day, but not a bad day either. It was mostly downhill from 9:30 into the close. So you could almost look at this like we spent most of the day in a downtrend, but in the end, this was a range, and we just had an equal movement down to the second half of the range. So, but I would have definitely played this channel, and I would have respected those highs and lows until they prove they're not in play anymore. So even though I was looking at this more as a range day and figuring that the highs and lows of the range would take precedence, I'm not going to ignore this channel because it's holding and looking very strongly down through here, especially when we start overshooting it. It might even have another tier to it. So this might just be a midline. Doesn't turn out to be the case, but you don't know that ahead of time. So you got to respect it and play it as such until you get something that tells you different. But anyway, another Monday. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow, but I'm done for today. This is Matt with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.